All right, hello everyone. My name is John Kaplan. For those of you I have not met, I do a lot of things around eVA, and today I'm going to focus on talking about user management. Yes, today is not a wish list or a things we hope to fix in the future. It is meant to be a demonstration of the way user management works today, and then going through all of the fields, all of the different variations of those kind of user transactions, and going from there. I think I have Susan on the call as well. I think. If she has anything to add, she is very much the expert in this area as well, so she might be interrupting here and there, which is not really an interruption, more an added piece of information. So,
hi everybody.
Let's see. All righty. So I have a list for those. I guess you guys can see my video. Can you guys see my screen?
No.
Okay. Let's start with that. There's so, how about now?
Yes, we can see it now.
Awesome. All right. So we have a few items that we're going to go through. We're going to start with kind of the browse user page. Then we're going to go through create, edit, delete, the audit trail, and how to download any user data. And then just a series of kind of questions and review areas that Yana and Sherry pulled together. So first off, I'm going to log in as a user who has user management. And we'll kick it off with that, so that way we can have a valid list. As you can see, I went through this manage area. I'm currently logged in as a super admin. The next level below that is eVA administrator, which has access to all organizations, but only specific user access. And then beyond that, there's the user management level, which is kind of the lowest tier, which you only have access to your organizations. And be able to edit them. Yeah, can I log in?
No.
What? Exactly what you got. Sorry. We're gonna play a role again. We're going to log in, see what the world looks like on our side. So again, most of this should look fairly similar if you guys have used the new eVA solution. Hopefully the drop downs and all of those areas will feel very consistent and nice. Where we're going to focus pretty much all of our time today is in this manage users, contact statistics, user sync area. And then we'll talk a little bit about the ETL console, but really this last piece down here is meant for bulk transactions, which we're working on, but it hasn't quite gotten done. Not that it hasn't gotten done. It's more, we're just not ready to share it yet. So it'll be a separate conversation outside of just the UI user experience. We'll start off by heading to the user browse page. Anything that looks like this, where it has browse in the URL, will work very similarly across any part of the solution. So if you're used to rec browse, order browse, solicitation browse, supplier browse, user browse works pretty much the same way. We have some auto filtering going on. You can see here, we're only looking at users that are active, and we're also defaulting to limit to my organizations. This has been added to control external entities when they are managing their organizations. They won't have the ability to remove this checkbox, so they can only see users that are tied to their organizations. Because I am in Escalation currently, I have the ability to remove it. And what this does is it actually opens up to any user in any organization across all of eVA. You can see my list kind of updated down here. Now, I think the first question that you had, Yana, was why both supplier and buyer information is shown. The reason both of those are shown is in the new solution, effectively, the buyers and suppliers are maintained under the same umbrella, although they interact with the system completely different. The reason why is it's all stored. They're effectively a user of the system, but that does not mean that you should be editing supplier users within this manage user area. And honestly, it's only eVA administrators and above who would even see supplier users in this browse page. So just as an example, as an eVA administrator, I can see users that are associated to suppliers. Now, the reason you see both is because the eVA administrators have no guardrails, if you will. You have the ability to see any user, internal or external. You can get the information on those users. You can view these users and really kind of get the default. For supplier updates, I would recommend sticking in the supplier section, which I believe there's going to be a different knowledge transfer. So really, this is more of a, hey, just so you know, you can see these users in here, and that's why you see them. But again, we're going to focus on our actual buy-side users, and we have a few profiles that we work with. Next up, something to be discussed is we have a few additional filters on this left-hand side. And again, with any browse page, you'll have this filter on the left. For those of you who didn't see me, if I click it too fast, it's just this little filter looking icon over here. It'll pop out. If you want to save it so that it stays open, you can click this little pen and it'll stay. Otherwise, it'll hide automatically every time you come to the page. For now, I'll kind of lock it in place just so we can take a look. But we can really filter down our list by a lot of different ways. We can do it by profile. If you're trying to find specific users with a given profile, you can look by organizations, where you can actually do a full organizational tree, and you can pick whether something is within, or a user is associated with a certain entity, with a site, with a secretariat. Even you can pull that full list. Sorry, my internet's a little slow because I'm on VPN. Should have dropped that before. While this is loading, I can come talk to some of these other pages. The limit to my organization is the default that is checked for anyone who is not eVA administrator or higher. The idea is automatically it will only show users who are connected to your organizational scope. So if you are a VCCS user and you have user management, you will only see VCCS users in this page. It locks down so that it's not editable. Again, for the organizations, we can do all kinds of searches. If I wanted to only look at any user associated with the administration secretariat, I have that flexibility. If I want to only look at users in this Commonwealth Competition Commission, I can do that. And anytime you add a filter, you just have to click search, and really that will be what starts to drive your user browse page. We have a few other fields in here. I'll talk briefly about templates. We haven't started utilizing yet. It is a base piece of the new system where you can actually create a type of user that is a template and then apply it automatically. So instead of having to update 50 users, you update the template and that updates all 50 users. So that's something that we can kind of get into some fun use cases longer term. For now, it is available, but not really utilized. Expenditure limit approver. This is every user has the ability to have an ELA assigned to them. So this is the person who is approving your requisitioned based on whatever your expenditure limit is. So you can even do a search here for who is the ELA approver, and then it will return all the users that have the user you've selected in here as their ELA. So if I'm ELA for everyone in this room, if I typed in my name and it was set up that way that everyone had me as their ELA, you would see everyone in this room in the browse list. Same concept with the quick quote approver. And additionally, if you have any specific approval profiles that you want to search by, a common one that I know we're working with a lot right now is buyer manager. So this is for anybody that is a queue manager lead. You can use this approval profile search to start limiting or looking at who has that specific approval profile assigned to them. So you can see here in this option, you've got your buyer managers are going to be in each of these. So really, it's just another way to kind of look at your user list instead of just having this massive list you have to export and then try to figure out what to do with. Really, you want to get it, whatever you're searching for, as precise as possible. So if you're looking for buyer managers in a certain organization, so let's just say a 270 operations. So we'll just limit this list to show you guys a little bit of a smaller browse. And I'll show you guys how to export. At the bottom of this grid, you can see we have 6 results. The bottom of any grid within iValue, any kind of browse page, you're going to get a little cogwheel at the bottom. Now you can edit some of the visibility of these columns. For certain level admin people, you can actually increase how many you view. So like Yana could come in and she could say she wants to see 150 users every time she loads. She can update that in here. Or you can always download this. And it will actually pull in all of the relevant user information that we just saw on that screen. See here we have our 6 users that we got. So you can really use this as a quick way to grab information about users and really get a lot of information on the fly to be able to share with agencies or doing any kind of bug review where you can come in really quickly, grab this and kind of poke around in Excel if that's what you're going. Yeah, did you have any other questions on the browse page before I start diving into some of them?
No, that was good. That was good. And one thing was about showing this is because we're not going to have the reports where we would usually pull this information from coming here.
Yes.
So that was the important part about being able to search.
I have a question. So the org perimeter is the sites, right?
It's anything else.
So will it, I'm asking because we don't see it now. So when we go and give everybody the agency clearinghouse, is it going to show all the sites there or just the one? And I'm asking because I know that the logic piece is only showing one unless you click into it.
I'm not sure I understand.
So because our users are going to have multiple sites. So will it show all those sites on this sheet or are you going to have to click in?
So this will be the same sites, right? Everything is the same. You'll get more users in this list because of query all.
Okay.
So when that query all fix comes in now, instead of 7 users, you might have 50 because more people are associated to that site.
And it's going to pull all the sites that are associated as opposed to just the first one.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is anything
So
that
it's
they
not
have
connected. What
visibility.
we're seeing isn't really connected to everything that they have access to.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll hop into the next use case that we're going to go over, and it's going to be create user management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of each area on this page. Since we're doing a full recording, we can kind of have all that tracked and be able to share longer term. And I'm going to talk about any tips and tricks that I know that I've used over the last few months of playing around in here. And then if anyone else has anything they want to add. So for user management, this top section is really more of an informational area. So each user login is going to be created automatically based on the same standard that we have today, which I believe is first letter of your first name, first 7 letters of your last, and then if it's a repeat, so L Smith, it would add the next integer onto that. So the next, it would be A Smith 45, for instance. You guys don't need to worry about it. It's nothing that needs to be filled in. It's just something that will be tracked. And the next time you come into this user, you'll actually see what that username is. And that's effectively the same thing that we have today with the users and their username. This next area is template. It's that piece that I mentioned before we haven't played with too much, but really the idea is you can make a template associated to a user so that you're only making an update on the template instead of making an update to each individual user. External profiles. This is kind of the same boat as we talked about with seeing supplier users in the user dropdown list. If for any reason a supplier needed to be created in this user area, you would give them these external profiles here. In general, and for kind of the use of today's meeting, I don't see anyone from a user management standpoint ever associating these profiles. You guys will be living in this area of internal profiles, which is what I will actually talk about next before I go into that. So internal profiles, we have a lot listed on here. I'm going to kind of go through the ones that have some level of importance and are actually applied to users and in conversion and will be applied to users in production. So anything that I skip for now isn't being applied to any user, but it is possible as the eVA administrator to give them access if needed. This top level view, administrator, is really CGI. It is our way of being able to move through the system, debug issues. We get all the additional query searching, all the fun things that some of you may have seen when we first brought everyone into the new eVA solution, that we have trimmed back a little bit because we don't want to give people too much access. Again, you won't be giving many people administrator. Central receiver is the concept of having a user who is receiving for your entity. The only permissions or authorizations that this user has or this profile has is to be able to search for their organization's orders and to be able to create receipts for those orders. So this is kind of the new way of handling central receiving, as opposed to an Ariba associated to your bisense.org and Fire and all this other fun stuff. Now we're giving people the flexibility when they receive an order at, let's say, a central receiving office of some kind, they can search for the order, get it, review the information, create the receipt, and add all that, and it will effectively kind of finalize that order. Data administrator and data administrator read only are similar. The major difference is one, you can't edit things, the other you can. The idea behind data administrator is that you are able to update COA, chart of account information, what fields are available, if they're required, the data behind those fields, and as well as rules, I believe. Again, the read only is meant to be given to people who could only be able to review this, but not necessarily change any of that. And by default, both the data administrator and the user management are going to be restricted by the organizations that your user has set up within their org perimeter. So if I have access to DPS, I will be able to maintain data for only DPS, and I wouldn't be able to maintain data for someone else. Similar for user management, which we talked about previously. employee is kind of the base level user profile. This is, you have access to the system, you can get in, but you can't really do anything. You can see recs and orders for your organization, but you can't edit them, you can't create them, you can't receive on them, you can't change them, you can't really do anything other than kind of review. This is something that should be given to every user as a baseline. And then additionally, they get another profile as well. So in every case, when you're making a new user or creating a new user, you always want to give them employee. And let's say they're a requisitioner, we can give them, you give them requisitioner as well. The idea is there are some baseline pieces of access to the system that employee has that we can maintain and handle within this profile. So if it's standard across the board to everyone, when we make a change in here, then everyone is updated across the board. If for some reason someone doesn't have employee checked, when we make those kinds of changes, it won't necessarily update unless we've also made that change in this profile. So the big takeaway is give employee to everyone. Whenever you're creating, updating anything with a user, it gives them that base level of access, which is very important. eVA administrator, this is kind of the AE eVA team level of access. Really, you can see everything in the system. You can maintain different areas in the system. It is very powerful and should really only be given to people that should have access to it. But it's kind of in that administrator. Requisitioner is someone who can only create requisitions. They can make change orders. They can create receipts. They can't do quick quotes or any other sourcing. I'm going to skip small purchase sourcing first. The small purchase sourcing is you have access to quick quote, but you don't have access to complex sourcing. So you can't create an RFP, but you can create a quick quote. And then sealed sourcing is kind of the full buyer profile where they can create sourcing RFP flex option and then do everything that a requisitioner can. So you kind of build up from requisitioner, small purchasing or small purchase sourcing to sealed sourcing. And then lastly, we've got user management and user management read only, which is kind of what we're focused on today. Again, this is built around the organizations that you have access to see, so that if Virginia State Police wants to be able to look at their users and update them, you would give them this user management profile as well as employee, so that they can manage their users within VSP only, and they wouldn't be able to touch, let's say, BCCS or ODU. It's really just they would be able to manage their users. Again, we have a read-only option for more of the audit side or someone who should be able to review but not change. I know that was a lot. Hopefully I didn't put anyone to sleep, but there's a lot of different flexible options in here. And it's good to kind of know what those are as we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about Auth Zero. Auth Zero is effectively our sign-in tool. So when you come to the home page to log in, that's the front page that you see is something called Auth Zero. The idea behind this is everything within eVA needs to be synced with Auth Zero for everything to kind of play nice together. So in production, I believe the plan is, Mark's still there? Is 10 minutes. This job will run every 10 minutes and pick up any user that has been created, updated, and then update Auth Zero to make sure that everything is good with that user. If for any reason you need to expedite that, we have these fancy little buttons at the top. If you are creating a user and you need that to be done quickly, you would fill in everything, save, and then click this create user in Auth Zero. If you are just making a change to an existing, then you would go in, make your changes, and you'd be able to update this user with Auth Sync. Now, in lower level environments, which lower level is anything that's not prod, we do it on the hour, every hour. So if you're testing the automatic sync job or doing anything with that, that happens on the hour. So at 2 p.m. it happened, and the next one would be at 3 p.m. And this would get synced up. When that happens, a notification is sent to this user to say, hey, your user has been created. Click this link to set your password. And that's kind of the process that is handled with Auth Zero. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I know there are a few more kind of topics that we can hit with it, but I wanted to go over the basics of it throughout this kind of creation and update process, because it is a major piece that everyone should be aware of. All right, so now we're heading down to the identity area where we've got most of these should be self-explanatory: title, first name, last name. Email cannot be duplicated anywhere within the system. For those who are doing tests, I know it is a pain. I want to say I have 7 or 8 different email accounts to be able to test various things through Gmail, Yahoo, all those fun things. But the idea is that we need to have that locked down from a security standpoint, that you have one email, because within this one user, we now have the flexibility to give the organizational kind of perimeters for them to do what they need to do across organizations, which is something we couldn't do with a previous solution. Internal identifier is really just any way that you identify yourself, your CEO, CIO.
Sorry, I want to interrupt here. It is the employee ID for the
That's one
community
of them.
colleges. Yeah, you're thinking of the probably position.
Yeah. That is one thing. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, this is the ID number. Position, this is the CIO, CEO, all of that. These expenditure note accounts, again, isn't something we're being used right now. It's something that's there and available, but as you just saw when I click this note drop down, is available. There's nothing to be populated in here. So really, you'll never use it. Daily working time, if this is set, it's just something that's tracked. If you want to say 40 hours, if you're a full-time employee, or 20 if you're not. Again, this is completely optional, so it's not something that needs to be filled out. Status. We have a few different statuses. I actually have a cheat sheet for this one. I'd like to remember. We can go back to our design. So active is a normal status for any user that has access to the application. If you're blocked, the user does not have access to the application, but you could block them quickly to be able to stop them from getting in, whether it's temporary or not. Disabled is the status that is given to user accounts when they have reached the inactivity threshold, which is 90 days. So a job runs daily that says, hey, who needs to be kicked out, basically, or set to disabled. And then that disablement happens. The user is updated automatically to disabled. And then that effectively locks the user out. Auth Zero is then updated on its 10-minute update cycle. And then beyond that, the next time they log in, it'll say, hey, your account was disabled. You need to reset your password. Yeah. Deleted is someone who is just shouldn't have any access to the system at all. They are removed. You cannot really get them back. It's really a logical deletion, but deleted is okay, this person's gone forever. We're removing them. So really blocked and disabled are the main statuses that we want to live within. And then lastly, this imported user is really just to track for anybody who has been imported into the system. This last area is phone, pretty standard phone, cell phone, fax. For this guy, I'm gonna go ahead and name him John S. 34, because I'm sure I have that many. You guys can see my handy dandy way of making a unique email by putting in a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Do you have any questions on this page before I head to overtime?
Yeah, I kind of do. That status of imported user. Is that for like the GMU P card process where they're, if a user's not in the system, it automatically creates a form?
We're not using them yet. They're still active, I think, for new
Some of them is active.
for now. But
So
that
what's
is
that
status.
status for them?
We could, it was just a standard one.
Okay, they kind of look out of the box.
Mhm.
Do you need to save that first before you hit the left side? No, okay.
I was gonna say, that's my tip. I have a few tips. So I always do this first tab, the second tab, then I save, and then I continue down. And I can kind of explain the reason why. So on this first page, really what you're doing is you're setting the details about the user, their name, email, their profile. On the second, what you're doing is setting their Orga perimeters. So this is what they have access to see. So in this case, we'll keep it simple. And we'll say that they're a part of Commonwealth Competition Council. Some fun tricks, if you ever need to give all, you can click this little hand. Just be careful, because if you do it on higher up levels, it can give all to everything, which can be kind of scary. I would say in general, kind of keep it to the minimum of what they need to have. So for most, it's going to be one, if they have agency query at all, it would look something like that, where you have all the sites selected. So at this point, what I do is save. And the reason why is on the next tab, in the user preferences tab, there's actually a field that doesn't appear until you have saved one time. So if you had happened to navigate down one more tab and click save, it wouldn't have caused any issues. But then the next time you came in, you need to save that user. I'm going to skip to the main organization first, and then we'll go back and talk about the rest. But this main organization is a site level of your organizational perimeter. So if you remember on the last tab, I selected all 3 sites. And this is really setting their main, what is going to default in when they create a requisition, when they do actions within the system. This is their main site for this user. This is going to be closest to Bison's orgs today. It's going to be actually a direct correlation to Bison's orgs today, because we kept that standard across. Delivery place is again going to be your default site for when you create a receipt. So if there is a use case, which I don't think there is at this point, but we do have some flexibility in the future where your delivery place is actually a different site. You can actually set their default to be here. So maybe an example would be if you had a central receiving office for the Commonwealth Competition Council, you could set your delivery place to be for that area, as opposed to it being part of your organization. In general, and the way we're converting every user, these two will match up on day one. And that's probably the for a little bit until we start exploring some other options. All right, so I'm going to keep back up to the top here, and we're going to start going through some of these options. We have a My Preferences area, and this is really kind of the standard pieces. And again, we're really not able to change much in here. This is just more informational for how this is all set up. So your countries, United States, English, US dollar, what's your name format, your date format, and then any number format. And we did a customized number format to do the 1 comma or the 3 digits comma, or the groups and then the decimals. I don't think we have a decimal separator, so it'll look just like a normal dollar amount. In this next drop down is our very, very, very large list of approval profiles. I would assume at some point we're going to have a workflow specific knowledge transfer. So I don't want to deep dive too much on approval rules, but really this is how you associate a user to a profile. So similar to today where you add a role to a user, this is the same kind of idea. Except now that role has a little more flexibility and a little more power because now it's not just a role for A194, it's a role that you belong to for your organizational perimeter. So if you are in Department of Corrections, for instance, that you have access to 15 different organizations and you are the $1 approver, you only need to have $1 approver. And then when you have the proper organizational perimeter, now you will be an approver for each of those organizations wherever there is a $1 approver. Instead of there being the repeated $1 approver 1,100 times for every entity, we have one, and then we let the organizational perimeter control what they have access to approve. So it's a little bit different. It should feel fairly similar. All of these approval profiles are ones that have been converted in from production today. So it's going to be a pretty standard list of your approval profiles. And really that's how we're converting all the users even into these approval profiles. Because this profile mixed with your actual perimeter drives who the approvers are for a given requisition. We talked a little bit about main organization. Next, I'm going to talk about ship to build to. Unfortunately, the group that I created doesn't have any ship to build to addresses. So, unfortunately, checked that particular one first. But the idea would be these would be your ship to build to for this user that have defaulted in. If we had created one in an agency that had some ship to and build to set up, then we would see some options when we would see all. So I'm going to save delegation for just a second. We're going to talk a little bit about expenditure limit approver. So this is what we talked about briefly on the browse page for how you can search for expenditure limit approvers or who has the same approver across multiple users. This is where that is actually set up on the user itself. So in this case, I could make this user's ELA approver me. So John Test 34's ELA is me, and I set it for $0. That means any requisition that this user creates will now come to this user, John, to approve as part of the requisition work. If you don't have
a quick question on that. And sorry, it may just be my not knowing about it. What happens if people have the same name? What happens if there's like 2 or 3 John Caplers?
Michael Smith.
Yeah. Exactly.
So in that case, you would come to the see all option where you get the full list, and then you could look.
Let's give more information.
And then you pick the one that you want.
Excellent. Thank you.
And that'll actually tie in very well to the next one, where we would have the same issue potentially, where you have similar names. But again, this is for just quick quote approval. So this is for any user who maybe is new to sourcing or someone who has just joined a team, where maybe you need them to have their manager review their quick quote before it goes out the door. We have this concept today. In current eVA, it is used on and off, but it is a pretty powerful tool for especially new users coming in to allow a manager to do a little review on it before it goes out the door. And again, it's just as simple as checking the box. And then as soon as I save this user, anytime I create a requisition or a quick quote, moving forward, they will hit these. So let's talk next about delegation. So we have two different kinds of delegation. This delegation can happen in one of two ways, either by an administrator giving delegation of your either approval authority or giving access to your account for someone. Let's say you're out for a month and someone needs to log in as your user to be able to complete some procurement transaction. So that's kind of the difference between these two. Where that action is taken can either be done as an admin when you're editing a user, or if you are logged in the top right-hand side under my profile, I'll open another tab to be able to show the same kind of area. Users themselves can give that delegation out. So if you have a planned vacation when you're going to be gone for a week or a month, you can give your access to someone else, or you can just give your workflow access. So effectively, no one needs to log out of their or move from one account to another. They can just, they'll get workflow notifications as if they were you. That's kind of the delegation side. Subscriptions, this is a notification. So we have some notifications that are optional. So if you don't want to see, for instance, when a workflow activity has been fully approved, you can uncheck this box and you will no longer get that notification. By default, everything is checked, but it does give some flexibility. And I think the further we get into the solution and we add more notifications, the more this flexibility will really help users identify kind of information they need to know and need to be updated via email versus ones that they don't. It's worth noting that each notification can allow what's called unsubscribing. In this case, these are set to no. So, or sorry, yes, because they can unsubscribe. But we can very easily set notifications to no. We have a lot more notifications than what you see here, which I think is 8 different notifications. We probably have 25, 30 different notifications that we have within the system. So that means those other 22 you can't actually unsubscribe from, so that you'll always get them no matter what, and they'll always be sent. Linked users is something that we have in test environment, which won't happen and won't exist in production environment. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. And then approval escalation is a piece of functionality that we haven't fully explored. If I hit this drop down, there's really not much you can see here. Outside of your different organizations. The idea behind it is there can be approval escalation set up on a interval. So let's say you set up a workflow and after 5 days it escalates to and it would, that's kind of how you would set that up. So in this particular case, this field won't ever be filled out. There's really no functionality behind it, even if you did put information in it. Because it requires the workflow. That was a lot. Are there any questions on the user preferences page before I head to Logi Access?
I think we're good.
Logi Access is our new handy dandy Logi page to be able to add Logi Access for users to be able to see information about their entity. For those who have current user management in eVA, this page should, or at least the fields on this page should look fairly familiar. What we do is we actually tell you which organizational unit you selected in the Orga perimeter. And it's as easy as coming in here and giving entity access for this user to see specific information within Logi about A169CC, for instance. So this gives some flexibility. If there's a user that requires more than just that, you can give them multiple levels of access. And really, this is kind of meant to be a step towards being more transparent with buyer users. Say, hey, look, we know you can get into the system, you can review everything in here, but if you're more comfortable in Logi, we can give you access as needed with your user specifically. And then this will actually sync to Logi at the same time that Auth Zero syncs. So every 10 minutes in production and on the hour, every hour for every other environment. And it will update Logi to grant access for these additional areas. So it's a pretty powerful tool to give people access to Logi as well as any other pieces of Logi. So if anyone uses scheduler or has any additional roles other than the standard ones, you can update all that information in these dropdowns. This will just show whether something has been synced or not once that sync process happens. It'll just say if it's synced or not synced. Is there any questions about the Logi page? All right. I know I'm not going. Hit most of them. So the next thing we're going to talk about is duplicating a user. So I just made this user. I'm going to go ahead and click duplicate, and we'll see some new information come in. Some fields have been blanked out. Some fields stay the same. You'll see my first name, last name, email is now removed. My internal profiles that I selected previously are still going to be there though. You have someone that's similar in what their job title is and you're adding them to the system. Instead of creating them from scratch, you could look up that user, go ahead and click duplicate and start to fill in their details. Let's see. Additionally, when you duplicate a user, not only are their profiles copied, but their org perimeter is copied. So instead of having to wait and open up each individual area, especially if it's a complex user that maybe has 50 organizations chosen, you can just duplicate and it will bring in that user's organizations from the duplicate or from the original user. And if I keep my process the same, once I'm done with the second tab, I save. Head to user preferences. Now, currently, with our duplicate, we do not have approval profiles coming across. I know that is a known piece that we are looking at kind of updating in the future. But as of right now, if you copy or duplicate a user, the approval profiles are not coming. So no matter what, you'll need to do a review of any new user, whether you're duplicating them or not, and ensuring that they have the proper approval profiles added. And that kind of comes back to where it can be helpful for if you're looking at a user as a template, you know, having, let's say, Amanda up here. If we want to make it like them, then we can very easily just on a separate piece say, oh, okay, well, I need to give them buyer manager and eVA on behalf of. And that's an easy way to kind of work in both worlds. I know it's not as best as just copying it, but it is something that we are working on for the future. So we've got our organizations. It looks like our ship twos came in. I think there's only one then. Yeah, I think that was just a save issue. And again, for duplicating a user, this is really all you need to do. You can come into Logi Access. Again, once you save, you should see your organization unit pop up here, where again, you can fill in your entity access. Hopefully, we went through all these fields from the new user perspective. So now editing or duplicating a user should feel pretty smooth. So to delete a user, as I mentioned before, there are a couple ways to do it. If I set this user to deleted, it removes them from the system, not fully. It doesn't hard delete them. They're still existing. So this JTest1 user still exists within the system, but no one can log in as them. No one can access the system as this ID. Blocked is, again, pretty much the same thing. It's just putting it in a different category. And disabled falls into the same bucket, but really is more meant for the automated task when we're disabling a user with the 90-day parameter. So if you wanted to disable this user or block this user, I know we use a lot of the same type of words. And Susan, let me know. I'm pretty sure we're saying blocked is the correct status to stop someone for now.
Yes.
So block should be the standard of, okay, they shouldn't have access anymore. We're just blocking them. And then that will sync over to Auth Zero. And even if there is a syncing issue timing wise, so if you don't click this and the user tries to log in or really do anything in the system, once this has been set to blocked, they get kicked out right away. They can't have any access to the system anymore. So when they log in, they'll get this nice, well, not really nice, but you don't have access to the system. Okay.
Yeah, iValua will block them.
And so what was the status again when you have too many unsuccessful login attempts? Blocked. So it's the same if somebody's leaving, we block them. But won't they, if they do a password reset, won't they be able to get in? With the block?
If they're leaving and they won't be back. So can I give a couple examples, and John, you can correct me if I'm not thinking correctly, but for example, if somebody goes on maternity leave and they're going to be gone for a while, normally in the iValua world, you would mark them disabled. They won't be able to log in while they're on leave, but they're still in the system. So when they come back, you can update them back to active, sync that status to Auth Zero, and they can rumble on. If it's somebody that leaves and no access, you would update them to either probably deleted because you don't want them. It's a soft delete, a hard delete. So
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I misspoke on
That's what
No, that's all right.
that'd be the process. But even with the block, I think Auth Zero has a different password reset block status than this block status. I think they're two different ones, which makes it even better.
yeah.
But no,
Yeah,
I
there
think
is.
the
That is
answer
correct,
is,
John.
There's two different blocks.
yeah. So for what the purposes of user management are, if someone's gone and they're gone forever, you never want their user back, deleted. If you want to just do a quick, but it's temporary, do blocks. And if you want, they're going to be gone for 3 months. That's it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some notifications that we have available. So we have this handy dandy, and this looks terrible from this page. Something wrong with my browser, not loading. But really, there we go. Hold up. So we have the ability on the fly if a notification, if someone comes and says, "Hey, I didn't get my notification," we can quickly go to the user and click on that little key icon and it'll pop up an email that's generated within the system that basically says, hey, go here and go check. Go to self-service, forgot your password. It's the generic thank you from eVA customer care. If I click send notification, that goes out the door. So that's one way to notify people of how to access the system. They'll receive a similar email when the initial creation of the user takes place. And then Auth Zero will send them a separate email that says, hey, your user's ready to be set up. Click here to set your password. So those are kind of the different email notifications. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about statistics page. This is a way to easily look within the solution and see who has logged in and for how long and where from. So the default is sessions within the last 20 minutes, and you can go in and you can see that Spencer Brandon logged in for an hour at 2, for instance. And you can do a little deeper dive on the user if you need to, but it gives some visibility to, if someone says, hey, I can't log in, you fix something, they come back, or you come back to them and say, hey, I fixed your login, and they don't say anything. If you need to, you can come in here real quick and just check, hey, did they log in? And if they did, you'll see it on here and see how long they've been active for. So it's a nice tool to be able to check without necessarily getting full communication back from people, because know as much people.
On the user record, there's a connection as well, correct?
Yes.
So you could just pull up the user record instead of going through that list.
I have to log in as that feature. Let me log in. Log back on. And again, this tool that I use, the login as, will not be live in production. It's completely turned off. We have the flexibility in the test environments to do that because it's a lot easier to just move around from one user to the next. But I wanted to just talk about that briefly.
Sorry, John, that'll remain in in UAT and train for us to easily jump over there if the user calls. We won't be doing that in person.
Sure. Yeah.
Is there anything else on the statistics page other than just seeing who's logged in today within the past?
It's how long their session is, the IP address.
But I could get all that from the user record, right?
And I can go check on that once I log in as this user. Sure. But in that process, we got the eVA acceptable use acknowledgement page. So every user, every internal user, and buyers have, or suppliers have an MOA that they have to accept before they access the system. But every internal user gets this as the very first thing they see when they come into the system. You can see it has a whole lot of information. I'm hoping most of you know what this is and have seen it before. So I'm not going to go through all of it, but at the end, the major part is I check this box and click acknowledge. Now, this is a piece that is something that is reportable and I can get to on the back end, the database, but I'm not sure if it's exported in a way. And I know that is a question on here to be able to access it. So if there is a need to know if someone has accepted, for now, that will be an AR and say, John, can you tell me if so-and-so has accepted? In general, iValue is really good with not even letting you access the system if you haven't accepted. So odds are they have accepted if someone has accessed the system and moved around at all. Otherwise, you just kind of get stuck over and over and over and over on that page every time you try to log in. But if there is a need for anyone to get that particular information, that is something that we can see on
So, can I ask a question? I had a question from one of our team asking about, when deleting a user, do we need to edit the email address by adding something additional digit or something, since we now have duplicate emails? They reference a specific case where the, in UAT, the, user left and went to another agency, but that user at the previous agency had custodial care. So there's the finesse of that. And there were, so,
So we have, if they went to a new agency, they have a new.
but they had issues with the care, the care previous agency was hooked up. I think that's what I.
But there's no.
Oh, no, hang on, there's bubbles. They must be telling me what I said wrong. Say, you can pipe up if you like. Basically, also,
Because they're gonna have access to the site, so technically, right? They can act on the purchase order for the person.
Right.
Because they're
Okay.
gonna have access to
Right.
the site, so if there's an issue, they would. You just have to have access to the site, but if we're giving,
Yeah, there's no, yeah, there's no.
right,
Right.
Custodial, we
Right.
have one unique email address, but that will go over more when I talk about the policy and the standards and our procedures. That's a little bit different
Okay.
than what's going on today.
Okay.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the last connection. Thank you both for that. So once you've actually logged in as a user, you can see when their last connection was, which can be a quick check. And if you need more detail, for instance, it's really just the duration, how long they were in for. You can see I was in for 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And I just searched by the user and when I was created. But you can create this browse page. It's really more of a high level view, and really at the end of the day, it gives administrators a way to see who's logged in right now.
I can't run it to say, these are all my users, show me their last login.
You can do it one user at a time. So no, not the way to do it. But maybe within an organization, you can see.
Oh, I get this. I get the problem now. The question I just asked about the email.
Mhm.
So the person moved from a facility to the home office. And so the email address did not change. Right? So they were a 222 at the facility, and now they're at a 720 home office. But the email address is still the same.
Give them the new org chart every time.
Okay.
You don't, you just edit that same user. You're not gonna deactivate that user.
They would just they would no longer, they would have access to the home office. So you give them that order perimeter on those sites. And then if they no longer needed access to the facility stuff, take them out of that.
That confuses me with the agency query all, because we're not preparing to take people out of sites. So maybe the better way for me to ask this, I'm Sandra Gill in DPS, and I moved Sandra Gill to director's office, and I have the same email address, but totally different responsibilities at the agency. How do you reassign my workload and make sure someone else can handle it, since I'm no longer going to?
So you would have to update the account. Take you out of all the approvals and then take away your sites. So it's a twofold.
You keep saying sites. I still should have the ability to search for everything, so I should still have the sites. But what happens? Can I?
You would take away what you I think the question that the example that Barb asked was, They're at A7, they're at
A704.
A704 and they moved to
To
A720.
A701. Right.
Yeah,
So then you would take away A704 and give them A720 and take away their approval flows or update their approvals or
Right.
whatever.
The roles.
Yes.
The roles.
the
There you
roles,
go,
yeah.
the
So,
roles.
so she said she tried that. So she was practicing this in UAT, right? Because that's what will happen. And she said, she tried that and got error. So she took away the 704, added the 720 and got errors. But I made it happen. So I don't know what she did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a little more than that.
Yeah, so that might be a unique scenario. I'd say definitely. With the DOCs, yeah.
Well, think of even BCCS.
Yeah.
I'm working at Northern Virginia Community College. I accept a promotion and move to Bottisot, and I'm now in A270. And I should still have access to all those sites. My email address hypothetically stayed the same, maybe not, but you've got two things, removing the roles, but also reassigning all the custodial work, the old requisitions, the old contracts. So it's all about making sure, because we no longer have custodial, it's more about delegation. So there's that training component.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the user sync cockpit. This is really an Uber administrative tool. This is really at a glance the full view of what each user has, where we said if it was synced or not. So like if I put in 34. You can see here, I created this user, if you guys remember, before 3 o'clock. So at 3 o'clock, it picked up and moved to create it in Auth Zero. So this is at a glance able to look and see what is happening and what is going on with this specific user. If I update this user right now, this checkbox won't check before 4 o'clock. A new job picks it up and goes. But it is a tool if you want to look in any kind of a bulk way, to be able to see maybe any user that hasn't been created or any user that hasn't been updated. You can look and see what's going on. I think this is going to be useful later once we add a little better filtering to be able to really drive the data that we're looking at. But at a glance, it's just a high level view of each user and the updates.
So just one question on this. For login, do I have to have both boxes checked or just the created?
Or being
Just like
able
if,
to log in?
yep. So
Just
you use,
create.
okay.
Yeah, so basically, when it is created in Auth Zero, that's when the email fires from Auth Zero saying, go set your password. Here's your user. Go. If you want to kick off a sync from here, you can do that with this little fun sync button. You can also do it with these buttons up top. You can create users. Don't create users from that. Go in here. Go to users.
Any issues with clicking the sync button the second time?
So just run. And I can actually show, and this is for the Uber techies in the room. If you really want to get into some JSON and some REST calls and all kinds of stuff, if there's ever an issue, and we did have one that came up yesterday, a couple days ago, was an email change. So someone changed their email and there was an issue where the REST call was failing. And I did some digging and we have this flexibility as an admin to come in here and I can see that there was an exception, right? Then I can do some more digging and figure out what exactly is going on But a kind of tip and trick that I do, and this is more of a kind of on the seat of our pants quick fix, is if you uncheck and recheck and then pick off your sync, it will effectively redo the full create and update both those logics like at the same time, so that it will kind of force it if there are any issues. Now, again, that should be the last possible case scenario. Let the job do what they do. But if there is an issue that comes across where, hey, I created or updated a user and now they don't have access, it's been a day, those sort of situations, we can kind of kick off these individual syncs. Track. So this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but every user has an associated contact. They are very similar in how the data that they have and any information that is shared across them. But really, it's just another kind of glance at a user that has been created. The idea and kind of the big picture is you can technically have a contact that isn't a user to be able to be identified as a contact within the system, but not actually given access to the system. We don't really utilize it that way. So really every user is going to have contact. You can see at a glance, they get this nice little card. It gives login, their email. I added any information for the address, what their scope is, and if they had a purchasing scope. You can also kind of see at a glance what that is, and you can even export this nice little business card. So there are very few scenarios where the contact won't match up with the user. So in general, they should be tied together. It is not something you need to manage. You don't ever need to come into this contacts page and edit them. But if for any reason you notice any kind of discrepancies between the two things, maybe that would be the first place to start digging. Is if I'm looking at the user, how do they look? If I'm looking at the contact, are they different? But in general, any updates that you make to the user should be applied directly to the contacts on that save click. There is no syncing for that. It's all within the system. Right when you save. Last on the list is password reset. That kind of process. So we have a few notifications that go out that drive people to reset their password, as opposed to trying to create a specific, hey, user 123, here's your new password, or it's not a link to go reset your password. We say, come to the home page, you click, forgot your password. You'll be prompted to say, what's your username? You can do username or email. In this case, I'm gonna here. It's running UAT, it should get it. Pop up here. But effectively, that's all the steps you have to take. I'll get an email that says, hey, you asked for your password to be reset. And then as soon as I click the link from the email, it'll pump me back in to be able to set that password. So this is the email you'll get. It will show for each individual area. So if it's from UAT, you'll see UAT. If it's prod, you'll see prod, etc. But really, it should be pretty simple. You have a 60-minute window to do it, and that's just a security requirement to make sure that there isn't just a link out there for you to be able to reset your password multiple times after 60 minutes kind of dies. So if someone got this and then went away for lunch and forgot, and later that afternoon tried to come back and click this, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They'd have to go and click reset password again. But when I come into here, you should see change your password. It'll ask me for what my new password is. Got some nice little tips to make sure that you're following the proper procedure. My password has been reset. I'll go back here. I promise you guys that was my new password, not my old password. You couldn't see it. And I think I hit pretty much everything on this. Was there anything? Oh, actually, I'll talk about ETL briefly. So ETL console, and this is not for day one go live, but it is something that we have the power to expand on very quickly post go live, is the ability to be able to import large groups of users. So if there's ever a scenario where you're onboarding a new agency, for instance, or helping someone who's onboarding a new agency, I would highly recommend letting everyone know that you're doing it so you don't have to manually create 70 users or more in some cases. And we can use an ETL to kind of manage and expedite that. But the idea behind this ETL page, and I see a lot more than you guys see because I'm currently logged in as a super admin type user. But this ETL console allows you to review any information on any imports that have happened. One of our user ones that we got from conversion. So for instance, in this one, we loaded 683 different lines. I can get a lot of additional details on these users, what their names were, their information, etc. It's not just as simple as loading one file necessarily. In some cases, we might have to add multiple for organizational scope, things like that. It is a very, very powerful tool that we're looking forward to expanding and sharing with you guys in the future. That is really what this is.
I think I'm good.
We'll open it up. We got an extra half hour.
Quick reference guide, user guide, whatever for folks. I guess by the time you do this for the externals, man, you got something. So it's a pro. And so I've got a first round of edits and review, and so we're waiting for that. Okay. Okay.
Again, I always like to preface any of these demos and anything is not the last time you'll talk to me. I might disappear for a couple weeks in the next few weeks, but other than that, if you guys ever have any questions, we can figure out, or if there's any weird scenarios like the one you were looking into where you're removing orgs, that's all exploratory and new, and it's awesome that we're doing it. But we should know what that is and be able to then hopefully build on it and share that with others, right? So other people get it. I think just as long as we're continuing to have conversations, that's really powerful. This is all new to everybody, right? So I think if we just keep asking questions and thinking of those weird one-offs, by the end, we'll know it as well as we know current eVA.
I think that's good. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Absolutely. I
Thanks,
picked up some new things as
John.
well. Thank you.